Hey everyone, it's Kai from WCC again. Today we'll be doing another Bermuda deck profile. Unfortunately, my house is broken, doesn't have internet or power, so I have to make do with a fun deck, an actual fun deck of Bermuda this time. It's a deck that doesn't run grade 3 or 2 or 1 Rivieres. So yeah, actually a fun deck. So this is a deck that I've actually been testing out and playing around with for a while now because the thought came into my head. I really want to make Eve work, and this is a deck more focused around Eve. We're running 3 Eve, and let's see what she does. All right, is first effect. Look at the top card of your deck. You may call the top card of your deck to an open regard circle, and then the second effect is when your unit's power or critical will be increased by your trigger effect. Double the value of that increase. So the good thing about this card is that it's 14k. It's grade 4. Well, that's not a good thing actually, but it's 14k. And basically, you can just call a full field with a first effect. What this also means is that you can always get to looking at the top card of your deck, and you don't have to actually call it. So when you see a critical trigger or you see a heal trigger, you just keep it there, and your opponent now is threatened to have to actually guard lethal damage. This card can actually kill from very low amounts of damage. When you have a force 2 on your Eve, your opponent has to guard at 2, or otherwise it's just, yeah, they take 4 damage straight to the face, maybe even 6, because you're getting to that crit via Eve's effect and then possibly increasing the chance of a second trigger. Now, the other insane thing about this card is that it doubles the power of trigger effects. So what this means is that if you ride to 4 early, you have a whole amount of free damage just waiting for you to take, and those triggers will all be 20k. So suddenly you go to 34, and what honestly hits over 34, right? When we look into the future, Excel decks are coming, Narukami, Revan, all of those decks kind of just get stopped by one trigger, one 20k trigger, because they're basically 2 triggers, right, in one. So like Narukami, what hits over 34? Like what hits 34? Nothing really. The best column is something like a Chatura comes out from effect. It's 33 with Vanquish's 10k, so it needs a trigger to even pass. So basically, when you go high early, when you go to your grade 4 early, your trigger effect suddenly just destroy your opponent's turn and gives you extra turns. And even just this card alone, the double trigger effect is so underrated in a way. Like if you just swing with this by itself, right? It's 14k by itself. Your opponent can't just 1 card guard it for 2. It has to at least 2 card guard. It needs 25 to guard for 2, because suddenly your trigger's hitting for 20ks, right? You become 34, so 15 is not going to do anything. So it really changes the dynamic of the deck and how much pressure you're putting on your opponent. And eventually, just because you can so effectively damage deny with the force 2 of this deck, your opponent will eventually have to take and pray for you not getting lucky with your triggers, and maybe you have to take it 2 and then hoping you don't get a crit. So that's basically the long-winded praise of this card. I actually do like it a lot. Let's move on to the rest of the deck for now, before we go into things like matchups and all that. So to back up Eve, we're running an old melody engine, old core melody engine. Why are we running this old engine? We're not running Fina's because I don't like Fina currently. Fina's not great. She doesn't really contribute much in a format where there's so much removal in a way, but also because Riviere just doesn't care. But the old stuff, the Caro and the Sonata, are still way awesome because they don't need a functioning Vanguard to do anything. Caro by itself, Caro and Sonata just pumps up your whole field and just gives everything boost, and you just don't care. And it works really well with the grade 2 melodies that you have because they still hit good numbers, they still hit those 23s, and when you just call all these big pressure cards for free from Eve, it just puts on so much pressure on your opponent. They really have to just null guard or die with everything. And if you do stop early because there's a trigger, that's fine. It's fine. You just crit your opponent, right? So these 2 cards are still around. If you don't get your Eve, you run 3 Eves. So usually you should hit Eves pretty easily. But if you don't, on the off chance you don't, you can still run a normal melody game, and just be very aggressive with just calling a big melody field ASAP and just bashing your opponent. So that's it with the backup grade 3s. Let's look at the grade 2. So here's the flex slot in the deck, one of the flex slots at least. So Coral, we're running 2 Corals. Here's the new Coral. what she does is when she comes into play, you can soul charge one, and if you have a Vanguard with Coral in its card name, you can soul charge another one. So this will only really come up when you ride her, or at grade 2 when you ride this and then call another Coral. The other one is that you can Soul Blast 2, and this unit gets 10k until end of turn, and if you're Vanguard with Coral and its card name, it gets 5k. So basically what she's being played in this deck is just for the Soul Charge effect. This deck, Melody itself, does use up a lot of Soul. Your Caros, both grade 3 and grade 2, just use heaps of Soul. Your Sonata uses 1 Soul, so getting this extra Soul Charge from a Coral is not that bad at all. But also when you run up to grade 4, if you have excess Soul and you just randomly call this from an Eve, this at least hits 20k, so it can at least put on some good pressure and do some good stuff. But you can really replace her. We don't use a lot of Counterblast in this deck, so you can actually replace it with something like a Mine, which can use your Counterblast more effectively and possibly get you better cards. So overall, decent pick, but very replaceable card. We're running 4 of the new Sonata. What she does is that Melody, during the battle, it attacked a Vanguard. This unit gets 5k and shared with all your units with Melody. So basically, she's just there to make things fat. That's what a lot of this deck is about. That's basically what Melody is about, just making things bad. She has Melody, she helps your other Melody units, and she gains power. That's basically it. And the last card in grade 2 slot is just the new Caro. Pretty straightforward. It's running pretty much everything now. Has Melody, and then when you place this from hand, you can Soul Blast 2 and search your deck for a card of the same name as your grade 3 Vanguard, then put it into your hand and shuffle your deck, and then you can only use this once per turn. So she's just there. When you ride your grade 3, you can just play this out and get another grade 3 and just make a big grade 3 push turn. It's terrible when you call her from Sonata, and that's just unlucky. It's not great when you call her from Eve because she has no effect, but at least she just has a Melody and can help you get fat. And that's pretty much all you need with this deck. Moving on to the grade 1s, we are running 2 of the old Top Star Sphere. Now, I find this card actually not great. If I wanted to chop something from the grade 1 slots, this will probably be it. Sure, you do run a lot of Melody units now. You probably run more than before because of the grade 2 Melodies, but what she offers, you don't really care if you get them or not. It's not great, right? And it's not like you're fixing your grade 3s at all, because you don't really care if you ride a Caro or you ride a Sonata as much. So Sierra itself is not great. Her second effect, where she doesn't allow the card in that column to be attacked, could actually be a detriment. Sometimes when I'm on Eve and I call this card out, it feels bad because she's like an 8k boost and doesn't really do anything. But then I don't want to not let my opponent attack my Regard. Let's say I've got a Sonata on the field. I would rather they attack that because that gives me open slots so I can check more with Eve next turn. So overall, this card is not very high value in my opinion. I'd take her out for other things, but she's just a grade 1. Also, I'm running 3 Aurora. This card just does a lot of work. Overall hand filter. That's about it. This deck does run a lot of grade 3s and 4s, so it's like around 11 high-end cards. So being able to just filter out is fine, but also being able to filter to your Eve is great too. I'd probably up this to a 4 if I was to take something out. We're running 3 Steza. Currently, this is the only main Counterblast card in this deck apart from Sonata. So that's where I'd say you can put in other Counterblast cards as you see fit, but she does a lot of work because Sonatas and Caros are going to the bin quite often because people will attack it or you're just going to filter them out early on. So Steza is the few cards that give you a plus. And then the last grade 1 slot, and probably the spiciest slot, is running 4 of the new Null Guards. So just take a look at her. She is Intact Parasol Ennis, Null Guard effect, and has that on ride, draw, and discard one. So this tells you a lot of things. It means we're going 12 crit in the trigger lineup, but this is actually that second effect is actually quite useful for this deck. When you have to ride this, it filters your hand for your 3s and 4s, which is basically what you really need and helping you get to that Eve. So that second effect, surprisingly useful. Grade 1 nulls, surprisingly budget. Well, not really surprisingly, but it will help you save money. And then lastly, we have our trigger lineup. Pretty. You probably understand it by now. You've got your 4 heals, then you've got your 12 crits. So 12 crit, very, very spicy. Makes the game very, very easy to play. All to Vanguard. That's what Vanguard's all about, flipping the yellows. But it means you don't have to spend $20 each for those perfect guards. But also these 15k just triggering crits, like, it's just so good, right? Especially on Eve, you will always either hit a heal or a crit. So they're both really beneficial to you. And then the extra guard is just really great early on when you want to stop damage. You want to stop damage until you get to that Eve and then just start cashing in on that 14k and 20k triggers. So 12 crit is actually pretty important for this deck. And lastly, surprise, surprise, we are running grade 0 Riviere. I did tell you we're not running grade 3 to grade 1 Riviere, but I didn't say we're not running grade 0. It just makes a lot of sense to run grade 0 Riviere because it makes your opponent think that you're running Riviere. So take a look at the full deck list now. But basically, the matchups of this deck, great against Excel's. Force, still very swingy. You're kind of just like a 50-50 matchup. Riviere, probably best deck in the format, so you're looking at maybe a 60-40 against that with this deck. But I guess you can cheese out a lot of players with Riviere. A lot of Riviere players will just go YOLO all in all the time. Means they just can't guard your later turns. If you get there, if you ride an Eve, you can just easily cheese them out with a random crit and they just die. You can keep every deck at low damage and just kind of come back into the game later on. Your critting with Force 2 deals 4 damage. So, long story short, Counterblast and damage is the resource in this game. If your opponent is not able to use resource, they will run out of hand, they will run out of rear guards, and they will have turns where they're just very, very lackluster. At some point in time, they will just want to take that damage, and that means they're either risking a lethal attack, or they're going to take so much damage in one turn, they can't use all of that Counterblast. So it's okay to keep your opponent at low. The magic numbers in this deck with Force 2 is 2 damage. That's where you're swinging for lethal, and then if you're on Force 1, you want them at 3 damage. And then your worst matchup here probably is Protect Clans, but do Protect Clans even exist? I don't know. We're just waiting for Angel Feather to come out with their crazy cards. But right now, you've got things like Nubatama, where you probably don't really care, because the pseudo field wipe, sure, but you just call a full field of Eve. Dark Irregulars is probably the worst matchup, I guess, because they can compress the deck pretty quickly and get a Protect and then slam you with high-powered columns. But if you get hard-legged and you get like a damage trigger or two, that turn's stopped anyway. So just pray to the triggers. So yeah, that's pretty much all about this nice deck. Eve is pretty nice that it's not limited to Highlander, so you can just go YOLO and play grade 4s. And I just really like that effect, because just going into the next format, you've got things like Narukami and Revan. Again, those things will kind of get stopped a bit just if you've guarded early and then able to just capitalize on that trigger effect, the defensive trigger effect and the 14k base that you're on. So hopefully in the future, next few days, my house is working again and I can make more super good content, or just content in general. And maybe the Bermuda train will stop. So see you later, guys. Bye.